My name is Gabriel Anderson, and everything changes after October 15, 2025. I live with my Aunt Sarah in a small house in Dallas. My mom and dad died in a plane crash when I was 6, and Aunt Sarah has been teaching me to pray every night before bed. She says children can hear God better than adults because we don't have all the worries and doubts that grown-ups carry around. I never really understood what she meant until that Thursday night when my heart stopped beating and I found myself standing in the most amazing place I'd ever seen. It happened during my normal nighttime prayer. I was sitting on my bed asking Jesus to help me be brave at school when suddenly my room filled with a light that was brighter than anything but didn't hurt my eyes at all. The walls seemed to disappear and I felt myself floating up higher and higher until I wasn't in my bedroom anymore, but in a place that felt like it existed outside of time itself. That's when I saw him. Jesus was standing there, but he didn't look like the pictures in my Sunday school books. His eyes were deeper than anything I'd ever seen, old and knowing, filled with so much love but also sadness. When he looked at me, I felt like he could see every thought I'd ever had, every secret I'd ever kept. But his look was completely loving. "Gabriel," he said, and his voice sounded like beautiful music and rolling thunder at the same time. "I have brought you here because children often see what adults miss. Your heart is still open enough to receive what I must show you." Before I could ask any questions, everything around us changed. Suddenly, we were looking down at the earth and I could see millions of people doing their daily activities. But there was something different about them that made my stomach feel funny. Some people had a warm, bright light around them, while others looked cold and gray, even though they were doing the same things. "Look carefully," Jesus said, putting his hand on my shoulder. "What you see is the spiritual truth behind the physical world. Those who truly belong to me carry my light inside them. But many who say my name have grown cold in their hearts." I watched as people filled churches on Sunday mornings. The buildings looked beautiful from the outside with tall towers reaching toward heaven. But as we looked closer, I could see that while some churches glowed with that same warm light, others were filled with darkness even though they had religious activities. "This breaks my heart," Jesus whispered, and I could hear the pain in his voice. "They sing songs about me. They speak my name. They carry their Bibles. But their hearts are far from me. They have made Christianity into a comfortable routine instead of a living friendship." Then the vision changed and I saw something that made me gasp. We were looking at a huge calendar and the date October 15, 2025 was circled in red, pulsing like a heartbeat. Around that date, I could see spiritual forces gathering like storm clouds, dark and scary. After this date, Jesus said seriously, everything will change for those who call themselves Christians. The time of comfortable faith is ending. The real believers will be separated from the pretend ones, and only those who truly know me will keep standing strong. I watched in wonder as scenes unfolded before us. It was like watching a movie, but everything felt more real than real life. I could see things happening across the world at the same time. In some places, there were natural disasters unlike anything I'd seen on TV. Earthquakes shook cities that had never had them before. Storms formed overnight with supernatural strength. But what amazed me most was how differently people responded. Those with the bright light around them stayed calm even in the chaos. I saw a woman in her kitchen when the ground began shaking hard. Instead of panicking, she got down on her knees and began to pray. And somehow her small apartment stayed safe while buildings fell down around her. I watched a man walking through flood waters that should have swept him away, but it was like an invisible wall protected him. "These are my sealed ones," Jesus explained. "They have learned to trust me completely. Not just when life is easy, but especially when everything falls apart. Their faith is not in their circumstances, but in me." But then I saw others who looked just as religious, people I recognized as the type who went to church every week and knew all the right words to say. When troubles came, they were filled with fear. I watched as some of them gave up their faith completely when their comfortable lives were disrupted. Others became angry and bitter, blaming God for not protecting them the way they expected. "You see, Gabriel," Jesus said sadly, "many have treated me like a magic protection plan. They think that because they pray before meals and go to church services, I owe them a life free from problems. But they never truly gave their hearts to me. When the testing comes, their shallow faith cannot hold them up." The vision changed again, and now I was seeing something that made my heart race with excitement and fear at the same time. I could see spiritual beings that had been invisible before. Angels with faces like lightning were moving across the earth, and they seemed to be marking certain people. It wasn't a physical mark, but something that glowed on their foreheads that only spiritual eyes could see. "The sealing has already begun," Jesus explained. "Those who truly belong to me are being marked for protection. But this seal cannot be earned through good works or religious activity. It comes only through real surrender and authentic friendship with me. I watched as these angels approached different people. Some received the mark right away and their faces filled with peace, even if they weren't aware of what was happening. But when the angels approached others who appeared equally religious, nothing happened. These people continued their activities completely unaware that they had been passed over. Why didn't they get marked? I asked, my child's heart breaking for those who were left unmarked. Jesus knelt down to my level, his eyes filled with love. Because they love their comfort more than they love me. They want my blessings but they don't want my leadership. They pray to me but they don't obey me. They know about me but they don't actually know me. Then the vision became even more intense. I found myself watching scenes from what I somehow knew was the near future, the time after October 15th. The world looked different, not necessarily physically but spiritually. The division between those who belonged to Jesus and those who merely claimed to was no longer hidden. I saw churches splitting down the middle, families divided as some members showed supernatural peace while others fell into despair and confusion. I watched as some pastors who had preached for decades suddenly found themselves unable to hear God's voice, while children and teenagers who had real faith began prophesying and seeing visions. The gifts I promised will return to my church, Jesus said, but only to those who are truly mine. Many who have built their ministries on human wisdom and entertainment will find themselves spiritually empty. Meanwhile, those who have been faithful in small things will be given great power. The scenes continued to unfold before my eyes. I saw miraculous healings happening through the hands of ordinary believers who carried that bright light. I watched as some Christians were able to multiply food for hungry families, just like in the Bible stories. Others could walk through dangerous situations completely protected, as if they were invisible to those who meant them harm. But what amazed me most was how these miracles weren't happening through famous preachers or well-known religious leaders. Instead, I saw a grandmother in her apartment praying over her sick neighbor and watching cancer disappear instantly. I observed a teenage boy laying hands on a broken water pipe and seeing it repair itself. A young mother spoke peace over a violent neighborhood and watched as gang members suddenly put down their weapons and walked away confused. This is how it will be, Jesus explained. The humble will be lifted up and the proud will be brought down. Those who have made themselves great through their own efforts will be brought low, while those who have remained small and faithful will be given authority they never sought. Then the vision took on a darker tone. I began to see the other side of this spiritual separation. Those who had been passed over by the marking angels were not just neutral. They were becoming actively hostile to those who carried the light. It was as if a spirit of confusion was falling upon them, making them unable to recognize truth even when it was demonstrated right in front of them. I watched in horror as some church leaders began persecuting members of their own congregations who displayed genuine spiritual gifts. I saw families turning against each other, with parents rejecting children who experienced miraculous encounters with God. Most shocking of all, I witnessed some who had been pastors and teachers for years actively working to stop what they called dangerous fanaticism, even though it was clearly the power of God. This grieves my heart more than anything, Jesus said, and I could see tears in his eyes. Some will choose lies over truth because truth requires them to admit they were wrong. Pride will cause many to reject the very thing they claim to have served their entire lives. The visions continued to pour over me like waves. I saw global events that would shake every foundation people had trusted in. Money systems that seemed unshakable would crumble overnight. Governments that appeared stable would fall into chaos. But through it all, those who carried the seal of God would not just survive. They would thrive, becoming lights of hope in a world growing increasingly dark. October 15th is not the end, Gabriel, Jesus said as the visions began to slow. It is the beginning of the greatest awakening the world has ever seen. But it will also be the beginning of the greatest deception. Only those who truly know my voice will be able to tell the difference between what comes from me and what comes from the enemy. As the weight of these revelations pressed upon my 9-year-old mind, Jesus gently guided me deeper into the vision. The spiritual realm opened before me like pages in the most important book ever written, and I found myself witnessing events that would unfold in the coming months with terrifying precision. Gabriel, Jesus said, his voice carrying the authority of eternity, what you are about to see will help my people understand the times they are living in. Many of my children are spiritually asleep, unaware of the battle raging around them. Suddenly, I was transported to what looked like a massive spiritual war room. Angels and demons were fighting fiercely over the souls of humanity. But what shocked me was how many Christians were completely unaware of this battle. I watched as dark spirits whispered lies into the ears of believers, causing them to doubt, fear, and compromise their faith, while their guardian angels fought desperately to protect them. The enemy knows his time is short, Jesus explained as we observed this cosmic struggle. After October 15th, his attacks will intensify beyond anything the church has experienced in recent centuries. Only those who are spiritually awake and rooted in me will be able to stand. The scene shifted and I found myself looking at churches across America and around the world. But these weren't the physical buildings. I was seeing their spiritual condition. Some churches blazed with the fire of God's presence, their congregations united in prayer and genuine worship. But others, despite their impressive buildings and large crowds, were spiritually dead. Cold gray shadows filled their meeting places, and the people inside moved through religious motions without any real connection to the living God. Jesus pointed to a particular church building that looked magnificent from the outside. "Watch this one carefully," he said. The congregation was singing contemporary worship songs with professional musicians and impressive light shows. The pastor delivered a polished message about God's love and prosperity. Everyone seemed engaged and happy, but spiritually the building was almost completely dark. "They have replaced my presence with performance," Jesus said sadly. "They seek to be entertained rather than transformed." When the trials come after October 15th, many of these congregations will scatter because their foundation was built on emotion and experience rather than on me. Then I saw the contrast. A small, humble church building with maybe 40 people inside. The music was simple, played on an old piano. The pastor wasn't eloquent or charismatic, but the spiritual light emanating from that place was so bright it made me squint. Every person in that congregation glowed with the same bright radiance I had seen earlier. "These are my remnant," Jesus said with obvious love in his voice. "They may seem insignificant to the world, but they are precious to me. They have learned to seek my face rather than my blessings. They will be pillars of strength when everything around them shakes." The vision expanded and I began to see specific events that would unfold after October 15, 2025. What I witnessed made my young heart pound with both fear and excitement. I saw massive prayer meetings erupting spontaneously across the nation, not organized by denominations or famous ministries, but led by ordinary believers who had been marked with God's seal. In one vision, I watched a housewife in Kansas who had never spoken publicly before suddenly find herself leading hundreds of people in powerful prayer. Her words carried such authority that demons fled from the surrounding area and a supernatural peace settled over her entire town. She didn't understand how it was happening. She just knew she had to obey the voice of God speaking in her heart. "The gifts I poured out on the early church will return," Jesus explained as we watched these scenes unfold. "But this time, they will flow through the humble and broken rather than through those who seek recognition. My power is perfected in weakness." I saw children younger than myself receiving visions and prophetic dreams that guided entire communities. Teenagers were healing the sick with a simple touch. Elderly people who had been faithful prayer warriors for decades suddenly found their prayers carrying unprecedented power, able to change weather conditions and influence world events from their living rooms. But alongside these miraculous demonstrations of God's power, I witnessed something that chilled me to the bone. A counterfeit spiritual awakening was also taking place, led by charismatic leaders who performed signs and wonders but did not carry the true light of Christ. Their miracles looked real. Their words sounded spiritual. But spiritually discerning believers could see they were empowered by dark forces. "This is why the sealing is so crucial," Jesus told me as we watched these deceptive miracles. "Only those who truly know my voice will be able to distinguish between what comes from me and what comes from the enemy. Many will be deceived because they judge by what they see with their natural eyes rather than by spiritual discernment." The vision became even more intense as I witnessed the persecution that would come upon genuine believers after October 15th. But it wasn't the kind of persecution I had learned about in Sunday school stories. This persecution came from within the church itself. I watched in horror as denominational leaders branded spirit-filled believers as dangerous extremists. I saw families torn apart as some members experienced genuine encounters with God while others rejected these experiences as emotional manipulation or mental illness. In one particularly heartbreaking scene, I observed a teenage girl who had received a powerful vision from God. When she shared it with her youth pastor, expecting encouragement, he instead contacted her parents and recommended psychological counseling. The girl's faith was crushed, and she began to doubt whether God had really spoken to her at all. "The religious spirit will be one of the enemy's most effective weapons," Jesus explained with deep sorrow. "Those who have built their identity on their theological knowledge rather than on relationship with me will become the greatest opponents of my genuine work." I watched in amazement as the date October 15th finally arrived on the calendar. Suddenly, it was as if a switch had been flipped across the entire spiritual realm. The division between light and darkness became so stark that there was no middle ground left anywhere. I saw churches where half the congregation literally glowed with divine light while the other half appeared shrouded in gray shadows. This is the great revealing, Jesus announced. No longer will people be able to hide their true spiritual condition. What has been hidden in men's hearts will become visible to those who have eyes to see. The visions became more intense as I witnessed the immediate aftermath of this spiritual unveiling. I saw pastors who had preached for decades suddenly finding themselves unable to hear God's voice at all. Their sermons became empty and powerless, and their congregations began to sense something was missing, though they couldn't identify what it was. At the same time, I watched humble believers who had never spoken publicly before suddenly receiving prophetic words that carried such authority that entire communities were transformed. A janitor at a hospital began praying for patients and seeing miraculous healings. A school teacher started sharing words of knowledge with her students that led to dozens of conversions. "The first shall be last and the last shall be first," Jesus quoted, his eyes shining with divine justice. Those who have exalted themselves through their own efforts will be brought low, while those who have remained faithful in obscurity will be given platforms they never sought. But then the vision took on a more hopeful tone as Jesus showed me the incredible miracles that would flow through those who remained faithful to the true gospel. I watched a grandmother in rural Texas pray over her vegetable garden during a severe drought, and rain clouds immediately formed over her property alone while the surrounding area remained dry. I saw a group of teenagers in inner-city Detroit walking through dangerous territory while praying, and the gang members became confused and disoriented, unable to see them even though they passed right by. "These are just the beginning of the signs and wonders that will follow those who truly believe," Jesus said with excitement in his voice. "As the darkness increases, my light will shine even brighter through my faithful ones. The world will be forced to acknowledge that there is a God in heaven who still works miracles through his people." The visions continued to unfold, showing me specific events that would happen in the months following October 15th. I saw massive prayer movements erupting spontaneously across the nation, led not by famous ministers, but by ordinary believers who had been marked with God's seal. These prayer gatherings would have such spiritual power that they would literally change weather patterns and influence world events from humble church basements and living rooms. I woke up gasping in my bedroom 10 minutes later, my heart pounding as Aunt Sarah shook me gently. October 15th, 2025 will separate the real Christians from the fake ones. Those who truly know Jesus will shine with supernatural power, while those who only play church will be exposed and fall away. The comfortable faith is ending, and only authentic believers will stand. Thank you for staying with us until the end. If you're still here, it means this testimony has truly touched your spirit. Now take action. Comment below where you're watching from so we can pray for your country. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the revelations we share every day. Share this video with at least 3 people you love because one click can save a soul. We've prepared a special gift for you, a free ebook that will guide you closer to heaven, fill you with God's peace and protect you from the darkness spreading in these times. But it won't be available for long. Don't let fear or delay steal this chance from you. Download it now. It may be your first real step into the light of God.